Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sandy Rosenthal, host of Beat the Big Guys. And today we have a medical doctor as our guest today. Her name is Dr. Laura Hunt. Hello, doctor.
Hi.
Hello. I'm so glad you're joining us today. You have an amazing story that I can't wait to share with our listeners. But first, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce my guest to you all. Dr. Hunt is a pediatrician and a mother of three who founded Midlothian Breathe, Moms for Clean Air, to try to protect her child who got very sick a few months after moving to Midlothian, Texas. The area was formerly known as the cement capital of Texas, but by the time Dr. Hunt arrived there with a family in December of 2014 from the Oklahoma City area, the region was now being called the DFW's Southern Star. So, Dr. Hunt, I'm sure you have a lot to tell us about the two very, very different names and the work that you've been doing since you arrived in Midlothian, Texas.
Yes. Well, and interestingly, the name change was quite some time before we moved. It was around 2005, 2007 timeframe that the name change occurred when a new economic development director came into town. And then my family moved to Midlothian in December of 2014. So it was about 7 years after that. And that was just kind of an under the table, low key type of decision that was just gradually inched its way in. But in our downtown area, we still have the old original sign from probably 1950s era, the cement capital of Texas. But on the bigger new bridges and things, it's DFW Southern Star. So that dichotomy is still there. And people like to joke that actually with the cement capital of Texas, they even misspelled capital, TAL, but then it's sort of a point of pride and argument and eye rolling from my standpoint.
And not only I understand from your website, not only is the Midlothian the cement capital of Texas, it also could be called the cement capital of the nation.
Yes. We have a higher density of cement plants here in Midlothian than any other part of the US. And I think it's possible in the entire world. That's something I have tried to investigate further and haven't yet been able to prove, but it's highly possible.
I think that would be worth looking into. That'd be quite the numbers work. People understand numbers. But anyway, please proceed.
All right. So as previously mentioned, I'm a pediatrician. When we moved, I had two healthy children. My youngest was about to turn 4 and no prior health issues. About 9 months after we moved, my youngest one just started coughing, and you might think, oh, pediatrician, we're quick to kind of jump on signs of illnesses in our own children, but really we're not. We tend to dismiss our families. Oh, they'll be fine. It shouldn't be a big deal, but the cough just never stopped. Months and months went by and she was getting worse and worse. I think it was probably 2-3 months, honestly, before I took her to the doctor because that was okay. By then it was too long. And, we tried antibiotics. She went to different subspecialists and just getting worse and worse. Her lung function had diminished to half normal. She had one side of her lung was completely collapsed down. She stopped eating. She stopped growing. She would get to where she was just, she still wanted to play, but 2-3 minutes of play and she's just kind of throw herself on the couch for a few minutes, rest and recover. And so you can imagine, It's especially challenging for me, not just as a mom, but pediatrician, to see your child suffer like that. And then, worst of all, to not know why. Um, and, we went through all the usual medical channels, the different subspecialists, the routine tests, things like that. And nothing was really, we weren't getting answers. And I think it was only natural for me at that point. Is basically all we were left with was the cement plants looming in the background. And I just didn't know what else to point to. And but part of my frustration, and ultimately a motivating factor in forming Midlothian Breathe, was the fact that how difficult it was to find any information, like, what do the plants produce, what's coming out of the smokestacks, how are they regulated. There was no good source of information, that type of information in our area when we first started questioning. And then that lack of access to information, just fuels further anxiety, and I would say distrust as well.
So are you the co-founder or the founder of Midlothian Breathe?
I would say co-founder.
Okay.
So there's kind of an interesting story behind that, in that, and I mentioned not being able to get any information. And this is through, my husband and I originally were starting with basically Google searches, looking for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, EPA, city websites, those types of things. Really, the only sort of leads we had was through a group called Downwinders at Risk, that's led by Jim Schirmbeck, one of your previous guests. And when I reached out to him, and I mean, he was the one person who just immediately responded of, oh, here's a copy of the permit request. Now, this is some years in the future, but here's a copy of the permit request that the plant closest to you is wanting to implement, and here's a basic summary of what it's all about. And soon after I responded with appropriate outrage, it was kind of next. You've just got to talk to this woman, Abby Sly, who just reached out to me, and he just kind of knew that we would mesh well together. We had similar concerns. It turned out, we only lived about a mile apart, but had never known each other otherwise. So we connected, and after a few conversations, just the two of us decided to have kind of an inaugural meeting. I mean, I would say at that point, we hadn't even necessarily decided if we were going to be a group, but we just wanted to get interested people together and talk about it. And Jim Schirmbeck helped facilitate that.
What was the goal of Midlothian Breathe? What was its mission?
Well, we initially came together after learning that the cement plant closest to me had issued this permit request, seeking permission to have their cap on carbon monoxide emissions lifted, which meant they were able to increase carbon monoxide by about 40%. And they also wanted to switch to burning a dirtier waste fuel called pet coke or petroleum coke. And this all came at the on the tail of the fact that after coping with my daughter's respiratory issues for over 2 years, and having to take her halfway across the country for more definitive treatment, but still lacking a really clear-cut diagnosis. My husband and I really deliberated a lot about, whether we could continue to live in this area, if that if the location was really the source of my daughter's difficulties. But basically, after kind of, some assistance from Jim Schirmbeck, reviewing all the available information, talking with occupational health specialists and this and that, um, we were given reassurance, honestly, by the experts currently out there that, Midlothian was much safer than it had been previously, and that, you know, there is no definitive way to know if our daughter's symptoms were caused by the cement plants or not, but that there was, um, the experts felt that it was unlikely. They weren't recommending that we move. They said basically the only way to know for sure was if we moved and her symptoms got better. But they said we would have to move for at least 6 months to really give it enough time to know. And that's just so impractical. So, anyways, after much deliberation, from the time of my daughter getting sick to the founding of Midlothian Breathe, that was about, um, like an almost roughly 5-year gap. This was a significant length of time. In that length of time, my family, we decided to stay in Midlothian. We moved across town, and it was literally the week that we closed on our new house, moved in. I remember driving to Costco, it's that's what people do when you move into a new house, and you're taking new routes and everything, new part of town, and seeing these white signs posted all along the perimeter of the Wholesome plant. And it just looked like a foreboding kind of warning with lots of fine print, but that was all I could tell. So then, I go to Jim Schirmbeck, find out, oh, this is bad. There's nothing good in this permit. And now here we are. We've just made the investment, the commitment, conclusion that things are safe for our family here, but they're clearly not. I mean, if a company has the ability to just make things worse at any given time, just on their whim, I was just appalled and dumbfounded, honestly.
That's shocking. So who are these experts that said, well, things are safer than they were previously? Who are these experts?
Well, honestly, the ones that I gave the most credence to were the specialists at National Jewish Hospital in Denver. That's where my daughter received much of her evaluation and treatment. And there, they specialize quite a bit. Of course, it's all respiratory conditions, but specifically things associated with occupational exposures. And so I was able to talk to a woman who's doubly board certified in both pulmonology and occupational health. Occupational health is the medical specialty that focuses on how exposures such as asbestos, coal mining, and I think cement kiln, kind of industrial pollution factors into that. But that being said, I mean, cement kilns are, there's it's a small enough industry that I don't think it's a heavy focus of much of the sorts of medical reviews of that sort.
Understood. But I'm very suspicious when they say, well, things are safer now than they used to be. Safer. I mean, a little teeny bit safer. I mean, way safer. I'm very suspicious when I see the word safer regarding the conditions. How did that make you feel when you heard that terminology? What does
They
safer
were a
mean?
little more dramatic of, much better. They've really cleaned things up. Those are because the concerns around the late 90s, early 2000s in Midlothian really centered around the fact that the plants were burning hazardous waste, or what was then coined hazardous waste, namely medical waste and, emissions related to that. But I think one of the biggest challenges when it comes to air pollution and human health effects are that there's really currently no way to really determine for any given individual, even if you know that they've been exposed to, horrible levels of particulate matter pollution. If they show up in the ER or something, there's no medical test that can tell anyone this person's respiratory conditions was caused by this particulate matter exposure.
Is
And
something
that's
like
a
this
real
with
limiting factor.
is something like this within our reach? I mean, do you think we have the technology and to do this? Do you think that's something that may soon be in our reach?
That's a good question. I say hopefully yes, but I mean currently we're still a long ways away. And I
Understood.
think it starts though with, or it's going to start hopefully with improved medical training. I mean, honestly, I completed my pediatrics residency in 2010. And I would say, in my recollection, there was not a single class or, you know, experience that had anything to do with health effects related to pollution, climate change, etc. But that has really changed just
Mhm.
in the past couple of years. There's now required aspects of the residency curriculum in pediatrics, and I believe family medicine as well, required components of education and training related to environmental health. So I think that's a plus, but it's like the very baby stages at this point, and I'm doubtful, unfortunately, that I'll see it like in the span of my own career, anything like that materialize.
Well, that's encouraging, though, that we're seeing the beginnings of it. Everything
Mhm.
has to start sometime. And I see that you started your work, Midlothian Breathe, Moms for Clean Air, because you're a family member of yours. And that is a powerful instigator to change, when you've been touched at home. So can you tell us about any successes, things that you feel are successes with your group? Midlothian Breathe.
Uh, well, I was I think we were talking earlier about the foundation of Midlothian Breathe and why we formed. I mean, the immediate trigger was this permit request by Wholesome, but our mission is greater than that. And we quickly came up with sort of a mission statement or motto, I guess you could say. It's on the back of the t-shirt that I'm wearing today, which is know what you breathe, share what you know, shape the future.
Mhm.
And that has really guided us moving forward. And that's where I feel like we have made the most progress, in that we've brought quite a bit of media attention to the challenges in Midlothian. We've provided the website as a ready source of information for moms and anyone else that wonder what's in coming out of the big smokestacks they see. We've implemented a network of citizens engaged in air monitoring. So really, we can't fully control what happens with some of these permit requests and things, but we can let them know we're paying attention. And I think just that in and of itself, when we let industry and city leaders, state leaders know we're paying attention, but we also empower members of the community to be better informed, know what to look out for, plan some of their outdoor activities accordingly, based around fluctuations in outdoor air quality.
Right, you're creating copycats. People see you paying attention. So they might think, well, maybe I should be paying attention to this too. There is a tendency for people to say, oh, someone else is doing that, I don't need to worry about that. No, we all need to be paying attention. So wholesome, you mentioned wholesome a couple of times. Is that spelled Holsum? How's that spelled?
It's spelled Holcim.
CIM, wholesome. So that's the name of a cement company. So
Yes.
can you talk to us a little bit more about the permitting and the cement company and the success that you had? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
So Holcim, it's actually, the full name is Lafarge Holcim. It's a French Swiss conglomerate, so international company. All the profits that they make in Midlothian, go straight overseas. They only employ roughly 100 local members, local employees. And I think the history, though, thing to make note of is that while the community, where it's rapidly growing, we currently have a population of about 40,000. When the 3 plants came to Midlothian, around 1980, population was more like 5,000. We were out in the boonies. This was no man's land, and with lots of limestone, and that made it a good place to set up shop. And at that time, it really they were able to provide a significant proportion of the local property tax base, and kind of helped fuel the school districts and the subsequent growth that's followed. But with this permit request, we really went to great lengths to get word out to citizens about what was happening, and encourage them to participate in the permitting process through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. We learned that it's a very onerous, discouraging process, honestly. And as far as the beat the big guys theme, really TCEQ is the biggest of the big guys in Texas, and very few groups have had much success in any, while they call it public participation in the permitting process, it is really anything but participation. It's really more hand waving. And so that was a hard lesson to learn. But through that process, we've become part of a statewide collaborative of different organizations like Midlothian Breed that are banding together, and really, that have all faced similar permitting struggles. And we're responding with a multi-pronged approach involving pushing legislative reform, air monitoring, citizen awareness. And like currently the TCEQ is preparing for a review by the Texas legislature that happens about every 10 years. There's a sunset commission dedicated to that. So we're really throwing a lot of efforts into, okay, now's the time that TCEQ is under the state government's watchful eye, and they are soliciting citizen feedback and that sort of thing. Like, we want to make our voices heard and our requests known, and recognizing at this point, unfortunately, unless you have a lot of legal funds available to you to basically sue the TCEQ or the permit requesters, you don't have a fighting chance in stopping an individual permit from being approved. But if you take the bigger picture, long-term approach, we're hoping to ultimately kind of reform things at the bigger level within TCEQ and maybe even some of the local city jurisdictions.
Thank you for explaining that. And so if I understand this, by forming Midlothian Breed, Moms for Clean Air, it put you in touch with other allies, and that being with allies, that sort of increased your strength tenfold, 100-fold. You know, the sky's the limit on how strong you can be with allies. And so that is definitely a success. And I couldn't help but notice that wholesome, the word wholesome, it makes me think of wholesome like bread. The other good word, that something's healthy, it's wholesome. It's almost like a trick they're playing.
Exactly. And it's not a coincidence. There's quite a bit that's been written on that they
really,
I mean, yes, English is not their first language, but they know what kind of how they want to portray themselves to Americans, and what could be better than, wholesome is white bread. That's what they're
white bread. That's exactly what I thought of. White bread. And it's probably right around that time that the word wholesome was being used to describe bread. I think it was, I don't know if it was Wonder Bread, but I'll believe anything. I've reached a point that the big guys will use every trick in the book. And that's one of the tricks they used. And you have to admit it's clever, but we've uncovered them. We've figured them out.
But you can tell, anyone can drive by and know that they're the complete opposite of wholesome. And then you dig deeper, and it just, the more you learn, the more unwholesome it is.
Absolutely. Is there anything, we're about running out of time, but is there anything that you haven't mentioned today that you feel you need to say, to empower and give encouragement to our listeners who are trying to change the world in their own backyards?
Sure. Just, I guess, biggest thing is to recognize that these are typically slow processes. I think most of your guests have echoed that you're not going to change things overnight, probably not even in a year or two, and that the only way to really make it through that long of a process, when it's going to be difficult process, that the decks are stacked against you all directions, is that you have to find small wins, other benefits along the way, like the connections with like-minded people, friendships that you can make through that, and also just the kind of being a more actively involved citizen. I have to admit, I was more of a, kind of let the other people do those sorts of things. Like, I've never been one to want to stand outside with a picket sign or anything like that. But I think the real motivating factor for me with this was that, as a local issue, I mean, I know there's lots of people fighting for, clean air nationally. I'm not going to be the only one. But if I didn't speak up and do something, form a group like this, who else was going to do it? That kept eating at me. And so I encourage others, in their communities to think about things in those terms. Where's an area that if you don't do something, no one else is going to do it? And then, just take that leap of faith that, what do you have to lose by trying? That keeps us going too. That, what maybe something won't work out, but, there'll be other blessings along the way.
I absolutely would love to take that 2-minute little soliloquy you just did and frame it and make it a standalone. It was so good. It was good, Dr. Hunt, because it was empowering, it was uplifting, it was inspiring, but it was also realistic. Okay, you got to be realistic about this. You're not going to accomplish great things overnight. It's going to take a little longer than you thought, and it's going to be harder than you thought. But the successes are worth it. And there's all these other benefits that you just mentioned. That was beautiful. That was just beautiful. Dr. Hunt, if anybody would like to follow your work or get involved, where should if I'm going to start all over again with that. Dr. Hunt, if anybody would like to follow your work or get involved, where should they go?
Sure. I'd recommend that they primarily go to our website, www.midlothianbreathe.org. And you can also follow us on Facebook at Midlothian Breathe, and email us at midlothianbreathe@gmail.com.
Well, I hope you all got that. And if you were thinking of changing the world in your backyard or your community or your town or your state, I highly recommend this episode, which is, by the way, the season finale of season 3. Thank you so much again, Dr. Laura Hunt, for joining me. And I hope all of you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on all of your favorite platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, you can beat the big guys.
Thanks so much.
Okay, stay with me.